Welcome to Village Talk Podcast with hosts Cortland Jones and Shauna Felton King. Village Talk highlights the views and voices of the community. And now your hosts, Cortland Jones and Shauna Felton King.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Village Talk, where we highlight the voices and views of the community. We welcome everybody back and thank you again for joining us. We always enjoy the company that we have. And this is going to be a great show. I'm so looking forward to it. And I also want to introduce my co-host, Shauna F. King. Shauna, say hello to everybody.
Hey, Cortland, welcome to this episode. It's almost been a year that we've been doing this, Cortland, hasn't it?
And 10 months.
Oh, my goodness. Time has flown and there's so much going on. And now we're here. You know, you and I are in Maryland, but we know across the country, schools are opening up, coming back. Some of them are still virtual. Some of them are trying hybrid. There's a lot going on, isn't it?
Look, I'm starting to have that getting ready to go back to work feeling that, I got to get up and go to work feeling. I haven't had
come on. But you know, I think March 15th marked the anniversary of when, you know, it was named a global pandemic. And just to look back over the year of where we've come since March 15th of 2020, you know, a lot of lows, a lot of highs, a lot of things, emotions, feelings, but we've learned so much. So I'm excited to get into the topic of today's show just because it has been so much, because this is one that's definitely near and dear to both of our hearts.
Yes, truly. And when I think back to when we came home, quarantine life is what I called it, the pandemic and the reality of it. Anxiety was probably the emotion that I felt the most. Mm-hmm. A lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, being concerned about contracting the virus and giving it to my mom. Those were like high priority on my list. Definitely didn't want to go back to work. But so much of that anxiety has settled a little bit. And then obviously thinking about going back to work, you can start to feel it again. But I've had a lot of rest, and I do feel like I've learned some things in that time, as you shared.
Yeah. And then with the children, think about it. I mean, you know, children, some people are doing well with this virtual learning, some not so much. Schools are just having to shift all the way. But, you know, we've got some teachers who are really in the field today who've been working throughout this, you know, so I don't want to make it seem like virtual teaching is not teaching, because it absolutely is. And yes, on some level, it can be more difficult, right?
Yes. And I'm, you know, in you mentioning our guests, I'm so excited. Schoolhouse Dilemma, the reality of teaching in a pandemic. That is our theme tonight. And I really want to, as you shared, allow our guests to introduce themselves to us so our audience can get a chance to hear who they are. And one of them actually is already back in the classroom as others are preparing to return. So we have two different views and two different perspectives. So at this time, we're going to allow each of them to introduce themselves. We're going to start with our two ladies who are here with us. And so if you don't mind at this time, first, Elizabeth, if you can introduce yourself by letting us know your name, what state you teach in, your grade and content, and how many years.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Pasolka, and I teach in Florida. I'm a fourth grade, specifically math and science teacher, and I'm almost halfway through with my fourth year of teaching.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And Simone?
Hi, everybody. Thank you guys for the opportunity to be on the podcast. So my name is Simone Walden. I'm originally from North Carolina. I live in Maryland. This is my 16th year teaching, and I teach middle school English language arts.
Welcome.
And Pastor Thompson.
Good evening. My name is Arthur Thompson. I am a behavior specialist in Prince George County Public Schools. I have approximately 32 years working in the educational field.
Welcome, Mr. Thompson.
I don't know about you, Shauna, but I'm definitely looking forward to hearing from our guests. And so my first question, and we're going to allow everybody to share their thoughts. My first question would be, what was your state of mind at the moment you realized you were going to return back to the classroom while still in this pandemic? And then what was your process as far as how you dealt with your emotions once the initial feeling hit of having to return to the classroom?
So I'm Elizabeth. I'm the one who teaches in Florida. My feelings returning to school and knowing that I was returning to the classroom were quite honestly everywhere at once. There was feelings of anxiety and being totally frightened, not knowing what was going on, but then also a feeling of relief and excitement. So it was very strange having both feelings back and forth, kind of depending on the day and depending on the moment. But I was terrified, and I think it's honestly for reasons every educator has, returning to the classrooms, knowing that you don't know what's happening. Nobody has had experience of the time teaching in the middle of the pandemic and how that looks and how to move forward. And then the most obvious one, contracting COVID and hopefully keeping yourself safe and also teaching in a way that keeps your students safe so that way they're not passing amongst each other. But weirdly, there was also a sense of excitement and relief because when I first started teaching in March 2020, when the pandemic had first hit, it was so hard to reach the students. And depending on getting the addresses to send things out or the phone numbers, being an elementary teacher, it's hard to contact 9-year-olds and be like, hey, like, what's up? Can you do your work, please? And you can't do that as easily when their parents have jobs and you have to cater to the needs of the parents. But knowing that I had those kids in my classroom and being able to see them daily and knowing that I could not only teach content, but also get that social emotional side. I was missing that factor where I wasn't knowing how they were doing academically, but then I didn't know how they were doing emotionally and processing.
Wow. I heard like the whole spectrum from excitement to nervousness to anxiety. And I think you probably covered every feeling, and that's probably the truth to say. I had a lot of bit of concern, but then there was some excitement to be able to connect with your children. And so how long have you been in a in-person teaching environment now?
I've been in an in-person teaching environment since the last week of August. I started off the first 2 weeks solely online. Then I transitioned for about 3 to 4 weeks doing a little bit of both. So I was hybrid, half online, half in person. And then by September, I was strictly in person. Wow. So most of my school year has been in person.
Wow. Thank you for that. And, here in Maryland, and Mr. Thompson, I'm going to come to you next. Many of the districts are just beginning to go back to a hybrid model. And even still, it's probably just for a couple of days. So, Mr. Thompson, can you relate to some of her feelings? What are some of the feelings that you have about kind of going back to in-person learning?
Well, originally, I was like, it was no way. It's still multiple uncertainties out there when you looking at the numbers, when you're looking at the health conditions of many people and somebody having some vulnerable health conditions that could possibly be affected by COVID. And to top it off, I lost my father-in-law due to COVID. So I had a whole lot of different feelings. I think about my 2 grandsons, and my wife's an educator. My 2 daughters are educators. My son is a policeman. He's in the street every day and been in the street through this whole thing, but they test every week. And of course, they had a priority even faster than us as educators to become vaccinated. But I sat in a meeting online when we first started the COVID meetings, the COVID team meetings in our school. And my principal just reached out and kind of was like, we got to do what we have to do. And it's not an exact science because it surely isn't. It's almost as such that we woke up one day and COVID is gone now. And all the reserve feelings that people have about COVID are erased, but we know in reality, they're not. I just heard about a teacher in a middle school that's been doing her work her online work, her virtual work in the building, and she died of COVID yesterday. And, so I'm going, and not to push before the second part, but, I'm moving on my faith. I've gotten the shot. I've got both of my shots. And I'm just going to be very, very cautious about how I perform in the building, being a person that often has to physically support students. It's going to be a new day. I'm going to be praying and covering up, the gloves and the mask and everything. And then being relational, I know that there's many of my kids that miss me. And that takes a big strike because I'm sort of their bridge into another way of life. Because I serve in a Title I school, and a lot of our students do not have fathers, don't have positive role models. So I'm the kind of bridge where we do our check-ins and sit down and talk and break bread and sort of get them engulfed in their educational journey. So I look forward to that. But again, at the 6 feet distancing and, the masking and Lord knows a whole lot of prayer, covering the babies with prayer as they come into the building, trying to maintain a whole vigilance of prayer, Well,
I appreciate you sharing that. And even as I listen to you, I first of all, condolences to you on the loss that you had mentioned. And then just listening to you speak of a most recent event, I know at the height of the anxiety for most of us, it's the concern of our mortality, or those who are connected to us. And these are real fears, like when was the last time? And though even as I'm saying this, I know that there are educators who could say they felt this way, but normally when you think of going into the classroom to teach, you're not thinking about this being the last time you do that. But depending on where you teach, that may be a different story. But in any case, it's now a reality in a way most of us would not have desired to have to contemplate that. So thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Mr. Thompson, for sharing. Simone, we want to have you join this conversation. At the moment you realized there was the reality of coming back, what were you thinking, and what has been your process since that moment?
So when I first heard that we were coming back, I said, man, surely this can't really be true. Once we heard that the governor had announced that March 1st was supposed to be the day that we were supposed to go back, my principal he met with us and was kind of talking about reopening plans, even though it hadn't been announced by our superintendent. So it was like he was kind of already kind of preparing us of the what ifs. And at first, I already knew I didn't want to go back. And I was like, man, I don't want to go back. And I had heard of other states going back. But I also heard of many people getting sick. And when I think about it, I think I had so much apprehension because you can't really control other people. And of course you can't control people, especially before COVID hit, but especially now with guidelines, it was like, I have to think about myself and protecting myself. And then how are other people going to protect themselves? So it was a lot of uncertainties. And I just kept saying, I can't go back, Lord, I can't go back. So I never wanted to go back. And when I heard it was really going to happen, I was thinking, wow, like hopefully they thought this thing through. And hearing all the stories, hearing different things from different teachers, it just really made me be like, I don't want to be a part of that. And although I know it's my job and I care about relationships, but I also care about me first. And at first I thought that was kind of selfish because it's like, there's so much responsibility that people put on teachers. And so to say, hey, I don't want to go back, even though, I care about the students, but I really had to, at this instant, I had to know I had to put Simone first, because if I didn't take care of me, it wouldn't be a healthy situation if I went back into the building anyway, because I'll be thinking more about what they doing and are they, if something's happening. And so I never wanted to go back at all.
Wow. Cortland, I don't know about you, but I feel the emotion in everybody.
Yeah.
that, yeah, the transparency. First of all, we appreciate